We're talking the most overrated things in football. Not players, not teams, not coaches, things with the Ringer's own Austin Gayle. It's a long one, but it's a fun one. Let's get it.
This is Renner Ranks, the ultimate NFL ranking show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. As she said, this is Renner Ranks. I'm your host, Mike Renner. We are talking about the most overrated things in the NFL. It got a little long. It tends to do that with Austin Gayle when he comes on the podcast. So let's get right into it. All right, AJ. I told you yesterday, I first said we should rank the biggest frauds in the NFL. And then I was like, I don't want to call too many people frauds. That's like negative energy. We don't need to do that. So I just left it open-ended. I said, just rank the most overrated things in football. Just whatever. If anything that comes to your mind that you think is overrated, let's rank them. So what are your top 3 overrated things? What is number 3 for you right now?
So we're going to go from not so insane and conspiracy and tinfoil hat to pretty conspiracy and tinfoil hat. So we're going to start tame, okay? The start is the Detroit Lions. I think the Detroit Lions are overrated. I honestly do. And if looking at their schedule, let's start with the base of this. If the Detroit Lions lose to the Kansas City Chiefs in week 1, I think that there's a lot of different expectations, right? One off of that. And I think that game was within 1 point. I think it could have gone either way in a lot of different ways. If they lose that game, their only wins this season would have been against the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Green Bay Packers. It'd be their only wins this season. And the Buccaneers, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 4 of the worst teams in the NFL, right? The other piece of this is we continue to pour praise on this offense. We continue to look at Ben Johnson and what they're doing with Jared Goff is like elevating and all that stuff. The offense this year is averaging 0.06 EPA per offensive drive, which is more than 10 times less efficient than the Lions offense finished last year. I think there's so much talk about this Lions team entering this other year or like another year into their like propelling forward out of the rebuild, being a playoff competitor. But when we look at how they play, specifically how they played against the Ravens, against a very good defensive coordinator, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL right now, I think we're going to continue to see that the limitation is still there. And this team, when it does make the postseason, I don't think is a deep playoff contender. But for the same limitations they had last year, the defense when rushing with 4 is bottom 5 in pressure rate. And that's with Aiden Hutchinson playing as well as he is. Like, it's not creating a lot of pressure when they aren't blitzing. Offensively, it's 10 times less efficient than it was the previous year. And I still feel like good DCs and good defenses, when they go against Jared Goff, are going to see the limitations that we continue to see with them. And that's not saying what they've done to add talent to this roster should be overlooked, right? I think they've added a ton of talent. I think the biggest non-overrated thing is what that GM has done to add talent over the last few years. You could question the Jahmyr Gibbs pick and the Jack Campbell pick of late, but like they've added a ton of talent. What is overrated is actually the ceiling of this team. The ceiling of this team, in my opinion, is still a first round, at most second round exit in the postseason, where Jared Goff looks a lot like Jared Goff in a game that they lose.
I don't disagree with you there. And it was my worry. It was kind of like, I don't want to like harp on the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, but it was like what I said when Jahmyr Gibbs got drafted. That felt like the pick that you make to finish a Super Bowl run, right? Like the Christian McCaffrey trade, 49ers thought was the icing on the cake. And they're like, or the cherry on top, not the icing on the cake, the cherry on top of the icing. They thought it was like the one piece that was going to get you the Super Bowl. And they were close like last year. Purdy, the whole quarterback room doesn't go down. They may very well do win a Super Bowl last year, but this team doesn't feel that close, right? They don't feel like they can touch the Eagles in the playoffs. Like that would blow my mind if they went into Philly and were able to beat that team come January, right? It just they just feel a tick behind, and that's why like that pick is just like knock the second round out the park. I'm not going to knock Brad Holmes. He's absolutely like his GM tenure has been off to a rocket ship of a start, but they just still are a year away. They just still feel a year away. So I can't help.
And so can I add to that too? Like, I don't know necessarily if they are a year away as much as they are still I don't know how many years away. They're a significant quarterback upgrade away from entering this top tier of teams. On ESPN's preseason power rankings, they were the 10th best team. Right now, according to The Ringer and a handful of other power rankings, they're a top 10 team. I'm not saying they aren't a top 10 team. I think that the gap, however, between the Detroit Lions and the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the Baltimore Ravens, the Niners, the Eagles, the Chiefs, is significant. They could be right behind those teams, right? Maybe they're right behind those teams, but it is significant. And to me, and we talked a lot about this on Tailgate when we were podcasting together, the goal in the NFL is to consistently compete for Super Bowls. It's not to win a Super Bowl. It's to consistently compete for Super Bowls. They do not have, in my opinion, the quarterback capable of consistently competing for Super Bowls. And that will continue to be the limitation for this team. As good as they are, and as talent bereft the rest of the NFC is, right? You look at other NFC contenders, like pretty much any team in the NFC East, any team in the NFC South, outside the Cowboys, but like any team in the NFC South, they are a team that has more talent than a lot of these other teams. My opinion is they still don't have enough talent at the quarterback position to be considered a team that can compete with the Niners, the Eagles, and I think even toe-to-toe with the Cowboys in a postseason.
We'll get back to the overrated talk in a second, but first, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Whenever the game clock stops, that's when it's time to DoorDash. Order chips, dips, nachos, or everything you need to make your own nachos on DoorDash and get it all delivered without missing the game. Kick back and kick off with unbeatable deals on everything you need for the watch party or tailgate. Score football's best deals on groceries, restaurants, retail, and more. Get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. That's subject to change. Terms apply. I know myself. When I'm getting ready on Sundays, maybe a little hungover from Saturdays, I go order a taco ramen here in Nashville. It's fantastic. It's down the block for me. Order on DoorDash. I don't even get it delivered. I just go pick it up. It's tremendous, and that's usually how my Sundays roll. Gets me ready for the game day. So 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23.
Situation.
Agreed. All right, my number 3. I went a little bit different. I said run pass decisions for your offensive coordinator. People lament on Twitter all the time, running on second down, running in certain situations. Why didn't they pass here? Play calls like that. Run pass decisions are damn near meaningless, in my opinion, in the NFL. Yeah. It is setting expectations versus defying expectations. It is about plays called. Mm-hmm. It is about basically doing something that the defense is not expecting. Do you know, I'm going to ask you this right now. Do you know the 2 teams in the NFL that have run the most on 3rd and 6 to 10 yards where you would never expect to run?
Yeah.
What teams do you think have run the most?
I'm going to take a guess because obviously you're asking me because it's teams I wouldn't expect. So I am going to go with that in there. I think that I'm going to say the Bills and the Chiefs.
It is the Eagles and the Lions have run the most on 3rd and 6 plus.
Wow.
Eagles have run 13 times on 43 opportunities, Lions 7 out of those 40. And that's like basically what I'm kind of getting at is that when you have a good offensive coordinator, they defy expectations. And so the expectation on situations like that is to pass, right? Like it's not – so run pass decisions, when everyone on 2nd and 10 plus now thinks you're going to pass because that's what the analytics says, well, then it starts to kind of behoove you to run, you know, when like you get play calls. So it's more about when I see people lamenting run versus pass decisions, it's are you taking advantage of personnel mismatches? So when you have heavy personnel and they have nickel, vice versa, are you taking advantage of those? That's what you should be more worried about. Just looking at run pass decisions in a vacuum. Overrated.
I think that's a very fair take. I think a reason for that is it's simple, right? It's like I remember like the whole craze around like who's using the most 11 personnel. The teams who uses like I look at it now as it like the Rams. I think of the team right now that are running the most 11 personnel, and it's like if you're not running like. I don't think you should have any personnel grouping that's more than like 60% of your snaps. Like you have to be like using that variable effectively. Like the Miami Dolphins, I think run 11 personnel like 43% of the time. They're using 11, 12, and 13. And they're doing a bunch of the running backs, all that stuff. But anyway, it's just like that thing with personnel. It's just like that with play action. Remember, it's like run more play action. How many people have screamed like in like 2019, like run more play action? The Titans are doing it. It's not that simple, and it never is that simple. But I think the simple stats and the simple takeaways are what like move people the most, because it's easy to be like, run the ball or pass the ball or whatever. I also wanted to add, you know why the Detroit Lions are running the ball a lot in 3rd and 6? Not a lot of faith in Jared Goff, my guy. I honestly feel that way. Like, I don't think it's a team that sees him as an elevator in obvious passing situations. And I don't think anyone, and I don't even think Jared Goff sees himself as an elevator in obvious passing situations. It's not who he's been. It's not who he is. He wasn't that in Los Angeles. He's not in that in Detroit. How you win in Detroit is playing better defense, and they have played better defense from an EPA per play perspective this year versus last year. And you have to run the football effectively. And I still think that they're doing that with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. The problem is, in these obvious passing situations, look what happened against Mike McDonald and the Ravens this past week. They went down 14-0 in a blink, and this thing shelled up. It was done. It was over. Like, they were going for it on like 4th and 10s, like late in the second quarter. Like, it was over. And that kind of game script feels like random and surprising, but it's going to happen. I hate to keep dogging the Lions, but I do think that we can be realistic that this Ravens thing is not a fluke. It's like, hey, if a team goes up 14 on you early, you should be nervous. I think that Lions team should be nervous.
I was number 2.
Number 2, moving off the team, moving into more harebrained theory, and something I never wanted to admit. Overrated. Gardner Minshew. And I love Gardner Minshew.
You finally.
I love Gardner Minshew.
You've come full circle.
For the Ringer Power Rankings this week, I was like, it's fun to watch Gardner Minshew. It's fun to root for Gardner Minshew. He has a funky style with the jean shorts and the hair and the mustache. He's got a cool relationship with his dad. He's got an underdog story that includes like him hammering his own hand to get a redshirt year. And he was on 3 different college teams, including the community college team. He's been on 3 different NFL teams. He's a wily, journeyman, fun dude to root for, which is so fair to say. He also isn't that good, which is like, it's fair to say. He doesn't have the legit arm of talent. He's not someone who's like, he's anything but risk adverse, in my opinion. Like, he is someone who legitimately runs into fire. And that's who his MO is. And that's who he's always going to be. Now, the Colts have had success with him, and I honestly think they should have won that game against the Browns. That pass interference that was called late, I think, was bull. I honestly feel like he played well enough, the Colts played well enough to win that game against Cleveland, which would have been huge for how much they've had success despite injuries to Anthony Richardson and the injury to Jonathan Taylor. But I think so much of that praise, I'm going to turn this into a positive, should be thrown on Shane Steichen, dude. What Shane Steichen has done in what feels like not an impossible situation, but definitely a disadvantageous situation with the Jonathan Taylor contract stuff, the Jonathan Taylor injury stuff, and now they've had to throw in Gardner Minshew as a spot starter 2 games this year. And I think he's had a full-blown start in 3 other games this year. Not what they wanted to have happen this year, which when you look at what they've had with Anthony Richardson, so much of that stuff was quarterback design runs. That goes away when Gardner Minshew comes into the ballgame, which it goes away with anyone, really. Anthony Richardson's a rare breed athletically. The stats I wanted to highlight in terms of like what Shane Steichen has done with Gardner Minshew to have success. The Colts run more RPOs than any other team in the NFL. A lot of run pass options, a lot of easy first read stuff that like is not gimmicky, but like definitely the puppet strings are there. They also run top 5% of screens. He ranks top 5 in percentage of the yards that he's thrown this year coming after the catch. His average time to throw is 6th fastest in the league. He is someone in this offense that's giving the ball out quickly, and playmakers are making plays. There are a handful, they had 2 free plays in the Cleveland Browns game where he hucks it up and they make a big play. Gardner Minshew mania should be dumped on Shane Steichen, dude, because I do think that this Colts team is every single week I find them like, man, they're well coached. Both sides of the ball. It feels like one of the more well-coached teams in the league. They show up prepared every single week. They are not a team that has been consistently favored on the year with Anthony Richardson and without Anthony Richardson. They go against what some people were calling the best defense in 20-plus years and light them up like early. Gardner Minshew's shimmying on them in the end zone. I think that's a huge tip of the cap to Shane Steichen. I think this Colts team, Colts fan base really should be excited what we've seen from Steichen in what is not an impossible situation, but definitely a shitty situation, all while saying, have fun with Gardner Minshew. He's the quarterback for the rest of the year. He's a good time, but let's all be serious now and not say it's Minshew mania. It's definitely Steichen spectacular or whatever the hell we want to do alliteration-wise there.
I think a good extrapolation of this is who's overrated. Any backup quarterback that has a good game. Tyson Bagent, right now.
So true. So
wildly
true.
overrated. And you go back to a quarterback that comes in, has a good game, they're overrated. I just can almost guarantee you they're overrated.
The nickname Teabag, though, not overrated in my opinion. I think that's solid. I think that's elite. I think that's got to stay.
That one has to stay.
If he did a Teabag celebration, do you think he'd get away with that? If his custom, how Waddle does the Waddle, I wouldn't mind a Teabag.
How do you even legislate
like a Call of Duty Teabag? Oh, you can't.
Yeah, I know. How do we that? What? I don't think that's even out the game. I don't think it's even legislated out. I think it's already
it could
legal.
Be
I don't think it's
that South Park episode where they're bouncing on. Is that teabagging? I don't know. Let's ask the chat or maybe ask your listeners. Can we get some updates on that? Do we like a teabag? Do we like a teabag celebration? Would we do it? Do you think it would be allowed? I need the whole.
I think it's allowed. I just think it's allowed. I don't think we've legislated that out the game just yet. They wouldn't even know what hit him when he went for it.
Because it's not sexual. A teabagging is not sexual. It's very much. How different? Let's have a real conversation. How different is the teabag than the finger across the lip first down?
Yeah, I've always wondered what.
Yeah, we know what that is. I don't know enough,
but we know.
I know. You know what that is. You know what they're doing there. It's from that Eastbound and Down. And it literally. Michael Crabtree got fined for that when he was with the Raiders because they said he looked like he was doing a throat slit, which you can't do any of that. But he was doing that same thing everyone does now. Yeah,
bring back this throat slash. We don't.
No, the throat slash you can't bring back. I'm here to have an entire podcast on celebration innovation because I think Anthony Richardson's 360 spike that he's doing is incredible. Now we won't see it till next year. I think that's awesome. No. I'm here for celebration discourse.
We'll get back to whatever this show has been here in a second. But first, snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. I've been thinking about joining FanDuel. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This podcast is also brought to you by Jase Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today, and it's important to be prepared. The solution? The Jase case. It's a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase Medical now offers customizability with your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications. Choose the medication that best fits you and your family's unique needs. Jase is continually working to expand their medication offerings, and in those recent efforts, they've added ivermectin as an option to the Jase case. Go to jasemedical.com, enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEE. Jesus, let me try that one more time. LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. All right, we'll move on to my number 2. We can have a celebration pod. We can rank celebrations at some point.
I'm here.
My number 2 is any singular defensive style. Like the people being like, we need to blitz more.
Wow.
We need to do this more. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Brian Flores as your DC running blitz, cover 0. It doesn't matter if you're Vic Fangio as your DC sitting back in cover 4. It is defensive football. It is about talent, 1, game planning, 2, to hide/avoid mismatches, take advantage of opposing mismatches, and then 3, situational awareness. That's DC in the NFL. It doesn't your style does not matter. It is taking your talent, putting them in the right position. You don't need to be running the Fangio style of defense to be successful nowadays. You don't need to be doing one style of defense or another. You need to have a defensive coordinator who knows how to do those 3 things. And now number 1 is obviously your GM needs to know how to do that one thing. But 2 and 3, game planning, situational awareness, that's defensive coordinator. So don't be we need to blitz more. We need to this more.
I also feel we don't talk enough about with defensive coordinator play calling or defensive play calling in general, marrying the system and the play calling to the talent. like to the personnel. Like we talk so much about that with offense. It's like, oh man, they have speed at receiver. They're running this, and this, or this type of running back.
I don't think enough people know, right? Like I don't think enough people know defense, right? Is I think the biggest thing. Like your general John Q analyst probably doesn't know. Probably can't differentiate cover 4 versus cover 2, right? Like I say that about some draft analysts a lot, and I think you know who I'm talking about, the guys that I say that about. But like, if you can't do that, like you that's why you can't talk about like bad play calls versus good play calls. It's just because like that's kind of the fundamentals. Like if you're not being able to do that, you just have no clue what you're looking at.
Yeah,
but
I think
about
being able to dictate it is another. But I also feel like we're not talking enough about, with defense coordinators specifically, like marrying talent to system. And I think the other thing for that is defense coordinators don't either. Like Wink Martindale is going to run what he runs, no matter who he has at corner and who he has at pass rusher. Same with Brian Flores and what he's doing in Minnesota. Like you do not see.
No, Flores is not running a ton of man this year, I will say. And because he knows that his corner is freaking
I've seen the blitz stuff. I've seen that he's sending blitzes at like 34%.
They still blitz. And that would put guys on island, but they've run far less man than they ever did in Miami because, Flores is a good DC and realizes that you got to avoid mismatches. You got to not put your guys on islands, right? He has changed up that aspect of his defense. And again, that's like a hallmark of a DC, right? You can't just be like, let's play man. I want to be a man heavy defense. You don't have the talent. You can't be a man heavy defense, right? You can't be a blitz heavy defense if you don't have corners that can hold up, right? There's kind of two sides of the coin there. So, we're not getting pressure. Let's blitz. Well, if you don't have the corners to hold up, you can't blitz either. So like it's a double-edged sword.
That's the theme on both sides of the ball, right? When we've talked about the best offense coordinators in the league, the best defense coordinators in the league, it's guys who are willing to be multiple, guys who are willing to be versatile and all that stuff and marrying and all that. I think that's been common over the last 5-10 years. I think that has been probably the biggest change in coaching mindset is like, saying I have a system and we're going to run this versus like, hey, we need to reevaluate. We need to reevaluate everything and like, let's run something else because I think that Mike McDaniel is someone who I think would run a different offense if he had a different starting quarterback. I honestly think he would. Like, I think he's someone he's not married to this system at all. And having that ability to not be like prideful over your system or like overly overconfident in your system, I think is super important.
Well, you know what it also is? It's just the proliferation of how easy it's become to watch other people's tape. Right?
True.
It's just like you
get,
if you can't like it in 1999, watching tape was a grind. You actually were putting it into a VCR, and that was a time-consuming effort. And like actual tape. So like getting that process of finding out and then deducing what they're doing and then try to implement it. It's like you could look at 1-2 teams over the course of like a week, maybe to like get that up to now. You can 4 clicks. You can watch over the course of one day. You could probably watch every college, offense scoring, 40 plus points, right, in one day and watch their entire season.
Dude,
to get plays.
You could say, I want to look at every play at the NFL and college level where a team has run motion in a red zone.
Yeah,
you could probably do that and have a staffer do that in a day. That screams this opportunity to mimic and screams this opportunity to the need to innovate because everyone can copy. Everyone has access to this stuff. It's no longer
it's the beauty of the free market, baby. Free market.
Let's go. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the playbook? How a coach talked about his playbook like 20 years ago, like in the 90s. I bet you if we let anybody see this, we are screwed. Whereas like now, it's like everyone knows everyone's playbook. Everyone knows anything, and I think I don't know. It's interesting for sure.
Well, that's like back then you had schemes that were distinct, that were very much we run what we run sort of things, and that is that. And then some other teams does something wildly different. So it was not like cross pollination the way we see today. So it's good for the game though. It's good for the game to just like take the best stuff from everyone. It's what it is. Now it's number one.
My number one. Most overrated thing right now in football.
The most overrated thing in football. The single most.
I think it's the Michigan scandal. The Michigan scandal is overrated. I think the Michigan sign stealing scandal is overrated.
As a Notre Dame fan, I am legally obligated to say you're wrong. You're dead wrong.
So there's. I think it's the number one reason it's overrated is because the content is juicy. Okay. If you are
Yeah.
any fan of any college team that isn't Michigan, you are eating this up like dog on a meat truck, bro. You are all over it. You're like, they should be banned for life. I honestly think Jim Harbaugh should see jail time. That is what any fan of the sport is saying.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's what's driving, like, if you type in Michigan, I've been in the rabbit hole. Okay. I've been full Alice in Wonderland. I've seen the rabbits. I've seen them all. If you go to Reddit and you type in Michigan sign stealing or Michigan signal stealing, there are threads with thousands of comments, people going through all these different things and what the penalty should be and all this kind of stuff. So it's overrated because people are eating it up. You go on Twitter, there's that video of the guy who's under investigation right now, the Michigan staffer, or the guy who's suspended right now, Connor Stallions. He's on the sideline. Ohio State's changing a play. I think this is from their 2022 game. And then he's a part of like signaling what the play is going to be. That tweet already has like millions of impressions. People are eating it up and all this kind of stuff. I think it's overrated because fans want Michigan to burn, right? Fans want to attack Jimmy. Fans want to attack Michigan. It's the best team in college football. They are blowing people out every single week. They want to find a reason why it's not happening. Whatever. The other reason I feel like it's overrated is because the more you dig into, and this is not even like doing anything other than just like digging into and reading the reporting from Pete Thamel of ESPN, who's done an excellent job reporting on this. Richard Johnson of Sports Illustrated dropped a story today that was fantastic on this Stallions character. The more you dig into this Connor Stallions character, the more you're like, there's no way this guy was the center of like a Michigan operated investigation. The details in this story are him, Connor Stallions. He quit football in 10th grade to coach an 8th grade football team with his dad. From there, his dream since he was born, him and his dad are Michigan super fans, was to coach for Michigan. After high school, he joins the Navy. He is a volunteer for the Navy football program. Simultaneously, as a volunteer for the Navy football program, he's a volunteer for the Michigan football program, unpaid volunteer on his LinkedIn that's now been scrubbed. He's saying, yeah, paying my own dime to go to Michigan games to volunteer as a coach. That person, who there's stories about him sleeping in his car and doing everything he possibly can, paying his own dime, sleeping in my own car, doing whatever it takes to be this volunteer for Michigan because that's his lifelong dream. There's also reports, and this is from Richard Johnson of Sports Illustrated, that he has a 600-page Michigan manifesto where he's talking about how he'd run the program and take over the program. There's also text messages where he's saying to his friend in 2021 that he's watching broadcast tape and trying to, while watching broadcast tape, identify signals of opponents, which is not illegal at all. You could do that all day long. Everyone probably does that in college football. But it gave him, and this was specifically in 2021, this opportunity to offer something to Michigan. As someone who's never played football past 10th grade level, someone who's never coached football as a hired staffer, it gave him this opportunity or this way in to having more prominence probably with Michigan. Now this is where I get into the harebrained theory. 2021, he's still a volunteer. In 2021, according to reports from Pete Thamel of ESPN, is when he started buying the tickets. He starts buying the tickets. He starts to get this edge, potentially harebrained theory. I don't know. And then from there, he gets hired in 2022. What would you do if you've been sleeping in your car for 6 years, working for Michigan as a volunteer, and then you finally get hired, probably off of his military strategy knowledge of opponent signals? You got to keep the racket going. And then probably, and this is harebrained theory, my opinion is he continues to buy these games with his own credit card and has people filming from the sidelines, from opponent sidelines, to continue to get that information, to continue to have this edge, because he's just been hired by his dream school to be a coach. He's on the sideline every game. He starts doing that in a cheating way. No one really knows. I think he's just really good at science identification. And now Michigan's caught up in this because I think opponents were like, "What? How does this guy know all this?" They look into his background. They're like, this guy wasn't even with the team until last year. How does he know all of our stuff? And then they're like, let's see if he's been in our games. His name's in their ticket database. And everyone's like, they're screwed. So that's all harebrained theory. That's why. So the two reasons I think it's overrated. I know that was a lot. And a lot of that reporting is, again, from Richard Johnson and Pete Thamel. Richard Johnson of Sports Illustrated and Pete Thamel of ESPN. Reading into the reporting and then reading into articles that had been written about this guy before even any of this stuff came out. And that's from people who are like writing about him as like this former high schooler going to this or whatever. I think he was very much someone who was motivated to do anything it took to be a hired Michigan coach, including in 2021, starting to buy tickets to games, which is illegal. And maybe he didn't know it was illegal, but starting to buy tickets to games in 2021. In 2021, they're like, dude, there's pictures from that 2021 season where they win Big Ten championship. He's with their DCs, with Aiden Hutchinson, all that stuff. In 2021, they're like, dude, you're really good at this. We'll hire you for 2022. And then he goes in 2022. He's like watching a ton of tape, and everyone's like, he's just really good at watching the broadcast film and identifying these signals. They don't know that he's getting this additional information from X, Y, and Z. And then next thing you know, in 2023, people are picking up on this kid. That's what I think is happening. And that's why I think it's overrated, because everyone's like, Harbaugh's a cheater. Michigan's a bunch of cheaters. The third reason I'll say it's overrated is every coach you talk to at the NFL or college level is like, sign stealing is not that big of a deal. It's not that important. It's not that big of an edge. Deion's like, you still got to stop it. Matt Rule's like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Every college coach, anyone connected to college football is like, who? That's the other reason. But it's overrated because fans want it to be like a fucking 17-year postseason ban for Michigan. Stallions has been baking this thing. This is all theorized, but based off the reporting, but theorized that he's just been like grinding the tape, paying his own dime to be a coach for his dream school. And then the third reason is that everyone wants sign stealing to be a bigger edge than it is, when it's not. It's not what the Astros were doing. And I wouldn't even say it's what the Patriots were doing, where they were filming practices leading up into games. This is different, and it's at such a smaller level. The Astros were doing it like organizationally. The Patriots, they were telling my boy Scarnecchia to get out there and make some plays. This guy, and I don't know this yet, I'm drinking the blue Kool-Aid a little bit. I think he was doing it on his own to get an edge, to be a coach at his dream school. And here we are. Give me your reactions to that. Am I being obtuse?
My reactions are, one, this guy, I love this guy, Connor Stallions. Yeah. His energy is insane. He's a grinder. Every program needs a Connor Stallions, even if he may have gone a little too far. But it's hard to argue. The other thing is, this timeline-wise, the fact that in 2020, like, Harbaugh cannot win the big one, can't get over the hump, 2021 goes 12-2, 2022 goes 13-1. This season they're undefeated. Like that, the timing wise, to turn into an absolute back-to-back playoff team house when they were perennial, like, I don't want to say, they were like Penn State before this, right? They were the team that just had talent, couldn't do it, couldn't put it all together, and then lo and behold, they put it all together.
I think that's coincidental. I think that's coincidental. I think that's coincidental. I think that's fair.
That's the one thing to me that's like, because NFL talent-wise, they've always had NFL talent, right? They didn't all of a sudden start getting dudes in the program. They've had dudes for a while under Jim Harbaugh. He's recruited exceptionally well. But somehow all of a sudden they started winning the big ones. Somehow all of a sudden they started taking to Ohio State, right? When it just never happened before. So that's the curious.
I think that's coincidental more than it is like connected. Because if you go back and watch the tape of what Stallions is doing on the sideline, specifically in 2022 when he was allowed on the sideline, when he was officially hired, and then in the games that he's been at this year in 2023, he is not. I'm trying to frame this correctly, but he's not having the impact that you'd think he'd be able to have if he knew signs. I honestly feel this way. I honestly feel that his knowledge of the signs was a 1 out of 10. He started to go to the games, and his knowledge of the signs is now like a 3 or 4 out of 10. And that is enough for Greg Schiano, Ryan Day, James Franklin, people that probably despise Michigan and despise Jim Harbaugh, to be like, I think that guy's doing something a little bit different, because they look into his background. It's like, this guy's never coached the game. He's never been in a game. And like, he has this thing on his LinkedIn about like military strategists. That's all. Like, there's in the reporting from Sports Illustrated, he took GPA, ACT, and SAT scores wrongfully. He was not allowed to have it for more than a day. He kept it beyond a day and correlated it to on-field performance at Navy. Dude's got crazy brain, bro. He is off his rocker. Now, I agree. Every team needs a guy like that. I think that every team needs a guy like that. He'll bleed for you. He'll die for you. But if the edge in signal sign stealing is what every coach in college football says it is, and that it's not meaningless, but something that everyone does in some capacity and not necessarily the edge people think it is, why? I'm just asking a question now. Why in the would Michigan task this dude with running the racket? Like, they'd be like, hey, we think this is a big edge. We're going to have someone do it that's not on our staff. And maybe they're not going to use fucking credit card. Maybe. Instead, has anyone ever lied on a resume? That's my boy. My boy was like, yeah, I'm really good at this stuff because I watched all the tape. When it was actually, he was just grinding games in person. If you went to the games in person, Mike, if I went to the games in person and I recorded the opponent's sideline with an iPhone and then pulled up the broadcast tape and ran it against the signs, you and I'd be able to figure it out. No problem. It's why the broadcast footage doesn't show the sidelines as much. It's why all 22 does not show the sideline signals either. Because if they did, everyone would know them. The bigger issue here, and this is the other piece of this, and we've gone long, but the bigger issue here, and Matt will hit on this, why in the hell do they not have mics in the helmets?
All
of this information is moot or stupid because college football doesn't want to have mics in the helmets. Yeah, high schools have that. Because they don't want to have mics in the helmets, you got 2 and 3 wearing an orange Michigan shirt holding up a McDonald's logo. You remember the Sam Hartman clip where he's
I was going to say, I like it just because we got the Sam Hartman
but I don't
double
know.
fist.
I think the scandal is good content. Everyone loves content in this league. I mean, people are chewing it up. I think Colin Cowherd has talked about it 4 or 5 times. It is good content on the biggest school in terms of ratings, in terms of where they rank in this college football playoff. I know they're number 2, but one of the biggest schools in the country. It's good content. However, unfortunately to you Ohio State fans, unfortunately to you Michigan State fans, and then your Penn State fans, it ain't what you think it is. It's not Jimmy and Michigan defraud. In my opinion, it's not Michigan and the Michigan staff putting together this Ocean's 11 level racket to go steal signs. I don't think that's what it is. Again, I'm only inferring off of the reporting from ESPN and the reporting from Sports Illustrated and some of the tape that I've watched. That's my final take.
Still, they should get the death penalty, in my opinion.
So what would you? That's a good conversation, though. What would you actually do? What would you say?
I don't know.
My theory.
So if your theory is correct, that it's one guy, going rogue. They hired him this year. I mean, that's a slap on the wrist. Recruiting, you maybe vacate wins. Maybe
you do not vacate wins for that,
dude. You vacate wins over everything in the NCAA, dude. Everything vacates wins.
What is the last thing that's been vacating wins? When's the last time NCAA?
Notre Dame vacated wins over some academic something. You vacate wins for minor stuff in the NCAA. Vacating wins is vacating wins is not even a punishment. It's you retroactively do it. You don't this year they wouldn't vacate the win. It would be after the year. They'd be like, hey, those first 5 games are now not wins in Europe. You'd still get an national championship game.
It's incredible.
So that's
man.
Probably vacate wins. Probably what's going to end up happening. All right.
Oh, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish has their loss in 2013 BCS National Championship vacated.
So that never happened, thankfully. The night I blacked out and had to go to the hospital. Never happened.
Well, it didn't happen for you either, to be fair.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Also vacated. That night was vacated.
Vacated it immediately.
My opinion is the penalty should be a monetary fine, and Harbaugh's missing some games again next year. I don't think anyone should be vacated.
Should have to be promoted to head coach, honestly.
And I think Stallions needs a job in the NFL, dude. I want that guy on my team. I'll say it.
All right. My number 1 to move off Michigan football. Thank God. The most overrated thing, in my opinion, in football discourse, NFL, primarily, obviously, because this is what it's going to be. Supporting cast for quarterback development. You don't ruin quarterbacks by not having good supporting cast. You have it or you don't. You get the biggest thing that matters, in my opinion, is the coach that you have with the quarterback. That is more important than any talent you have around him. Now, to play well in the NFL, to put up good stats, obviously you're going to have talent around you. No one, Tom Brady circa 2014 or something put up good stats with no talent. But unless you're that dude, you're going to have some semblance of either offensive line help, receiver help, guys that can open, an offense coordinator that can scheme. No one does it alone, right? But I think the thought of ruining a quarterback's development, Justin Fields being ruined by what's around him there in Chicago, it just doesn't hold up. Look at the guys who are ascending franchise quarterbacks in recent years, whether it was Josh Allen, who his first 2 years played with nothing in Buffalo. Nothing. Did it push back his development in terms of when he broke out? Yeah. Maybe he would have broken out year 2 if he had Stephon Diggs, but it didn't ruin him. Joe Burrow had no offensive line, literally tore an ACL behind an offensive line his rookie year. Didn't ruin him. comes back, still hasn't had an offensive line. Never ruined him. Justin Herbert has had like 3 different OCs, has had no semblance of an offensive line at any point in his career, has had wide receivers that all run 4.6s, doesn't ruin him. CJ Stroud had a full backup O-line the first 5 games of this year, or 4 games this year, whatever it was. That didn't ruin him. Tua played behind one of the worst offensive lines I've ever seen his first year, coming back from a hip injury that was like catastrophic. That didn't ruin him. Like this, like the thought of like ruining a guy, I think is just wrong. You obviously have to put talent around him to win. That's anyone in the NFL. That should always be your job as a GM. But I think the bigger price teams have paid, maybe not bigger, but when you put a ton of talent around a guy, you can be talked into a false positive, whether it was the Browns sticking with Baker Mayfield, whether it was the Eagles and Carson Wentz. Like there have been a lot of cases where maybe even like, Dak Prescott and his situation in Dallas, where they've always had one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. They've always had wide receiving talent and yet still never gotten over the hump. Maybe if Dak was on an average roster his entire career, he would have never been a $40 million quarterback and they would have moved on. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that the thought of, what we're talking about with Bryce Young now, is this going to ruin him? Unless it's like a catastrophic injury, which obviously is more probable when you have a terrible offensive line and when you're the size of Bryce Young. But like, my opinion, doesn't ruin him. You always should be trying to put talent around him, but you shouldn't be making decisions, which I'm hoping that the Panthers won't, that are like bad football decisions just to put talent around a guy. You always want to put talent around a guy, but it doesn't break quarterbacks to not surround them with talent. To me, it's worse to have bad OCs with them than it is to have not a great supporting cast. So that's my take. That's the most overrated. Because it always gets brought up. It's always like they have to have a supporting cast. It's like everyone has to have a supporting cast, but it's not the make or break for young quarterbacks.
I think you're right to identify the specific phrasing around like ruining a quarterback. Like it won't ruin a quarterback. I do think that it can put them in more harmful situations. I think it can also add to the difficulty to evaluate them, because if you're not, it's why you saw the Panthers leaking that they wanted to go trade for a receiver. It's like, dude, it's hard to evaluate. It's hard to evaluate what Bryce Young is capable of, and no one's open. Like it's hard. And I think that, but does it ruin him? I think that's fair. I think a lot of people have been like, oh, that ruined him and ruined them, blah, blah, blah. I think it's super fair. Do you have it or do you not?
Sam Darnold wasn't ruined by the Jets.
Who's a good example of that is Derek Carr. Derek Carr, in the greatest of situations, that 2016 season with Crab and Coop and Mac.
Had a great O-line.
It was cooking.
You had a false positive.
It was like, oh man, like this guy might have it. He's got a pretty deep ball. And it's like, oh no, wait a second. We
just surrounded him with an insane supporting cast. They just had an insane supporting cast there. And it was one of the top 3 O-line, and it was 2 elite wide receivers. And I guess Crabtree at that point, probably not, but like one elite wide receiver, one great possession. But he was good,
I'll stand by
so
that.
like that's obviously always the goal. You want to be the Eagles, putting Jalen Hurts in this awesome situation that can get you to the promised land year after year. Yeah. But if you can't, you still have to evaluate the quarterback in the context of what's around him. And you can't just say, oh, the supporting cast is bad, that's why I failed. Like looking at like guys like Justin Fields right now, guys like Zach Wilson. It's like, no, they just don't have it. They're not
playing well. Yeah.
So that's my most overrated thing.
I love it. It comes back.
That was good overrated talk.
I liked it. I'm always here for overrated talk. I loved it.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you coming on. It was much longer than I was supposed to do on a daily basis. But if I'm going to go long in a podcast, I'd rather be with you. So
hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah.
Thanks for coming on, dude. We'll see you next week. Woo! Well, that was a barn burner of an episode. Tomorrow, we will have Connor Rogers of NBC Sports coming on, the great draft analyst, part of also the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, to come on and rank edge rushers with me. Very excited to do that. That will be a fun one. If you guys enjoyed this video, again, we'll have Austin Gayle on every single week. Like, subscribe, whatever else you can do. That might be about it. On YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. It's very free. It helps us out a lot when you do. So thank you very much for listening, and we will be back. I'll be back tomorrow.